Hello and welcome to the OpenSpecimen webinar by FIND Diagnostics Geneva. FIND is a global non-profit organization driving innovation in the world of diagnostics for diseases affecting the world's poorest populations. FIND has been using OpenSpecimen since 2017 to manage their specimen collection from multiple sites across Asia, Africa, and South America. In this webinar, Stefano Ongarello and Anna Matonsky will talk about their usage of OpenSpecimen and their research activities.
So yes, we're gonna talk today about how we manage our collections that are happening in multiple sites around the world, and I give the microphone to Stefano to start presenting.
Yeah, so I'll just give a minute of introduction. I don't want to take anyone's people time, and Anna is looking forward to talk about how we use OpenSpecimen. But just a long story short, that we already spoke about our biobank and why we do biobank. We think that samples are absolutely important in order to develop, to validate, and to evaluate diagnostics. Like, these are three main components that all need to happen, and they happen thanks to samples. And the reason why we believe that sample collection is essential for all this is because it's difficult to set up good quality collections. It's difficult for somebody like imagine small companies, small startups that have a great idea and they want to test it or to validate it. You cannot just set up a clinical study on your own in a remote country. And if you want to buy samples, it's not always easy to find exactly what you need with the clinical characterization that you need. So for all these reasons, this is why FIND has always believed in the biobank, and we had the biobank running for about 15 years. Maybe you can move to the next slide, Anna. What I call the traditional biobank for FIND, which is already not as traditional as others, is fundamentally set up collections at clinical sites, and we set sites all over the world. We do at the sites everything that is the characterization of the sample, the labeling, the data entry. Then these samples are shipped to a central repository where they actually end up in the proper freezer, and all these then is keep track of all these thanks to software like OpenSpecimen. And then these samples at some point likely get requested by somebody that is interested in using them, and therefore we need to select the samples, prepare shipment, and get the samples ready to the people that receive them. What we ask is to be informed about what happens with these samples. So we also want to hear back at the end of the process what has been done with these samples. Have they been used for a new product? And yes, like, what is the performance of this product? Or like, how have you supported the registration of a product with the authorities and things like that. Now, this is, like I said, what we call our traditional approach to biobank. I have already spoken about our new vision, which is a network of biobank, fundamentally aiming at a better pandemic preparedness. We have four main pillars that sustain this vision. One is that we want to set up a model that doesn't take into account the disease or like the characterization of the samples. Like we are used to think of samples for TB, samples for malaria, samples for any sort of disease. Instead, what we think is important is to have a process in place that can be adapted to any sort of disease. And clearly, we are focusing on what matters to FIND, but FIND's interest is also evolving, and not just to infectious diseases per se, but infectious disease and how they coexist with other diseases. For instance, non-communicable diseases such as diabetes or cancer or hypertension, anything like this. We want, as I mentioned earlier, to be adapted to what the industry needs, which means having a quick turnaround time, but also having a clear understanding of where technology is going and what type of samples are needed, the quantity, whether it is plasma, for instance, whether it's urine, whether it is a dry blood spot. All these things need to be accounted. And for us, it's very important because to work with LMICs and to empower LMICs. So we invest a lot in trainings. We invest a lot in our collaboration with sites, and we want sites to be partners. So that means it also goes into developing, for instance, a scientific research together, and having not just a site, not just a facility for collecting of samples. A site is a partner that helps us in all the process that goes from the collection of samples to the outcome that is a better diagnostics for some disease that is, as of today, killing millions of people. And last but not least is we need to make sure that the samples are accessible easily, which means having a system that can quickly be used to select samples, share these samples, and get results back. All these 4 pillars are crucial for us, and that's the things on which we're investing for the future. Yeah, like this is just a high-level vision of how we envisage this system. As I said earlier, this network of biobanks that are kind of coordinated by FIND, with which provides some sort of guidance in terms of standards of quality, standards of data. But then from the point of view of a requester, there is one person, there is just one single point of contact, which is the point of FIND inventory. But then what goes on with the sites is something that follows this kind of standard procedure and standard data processes. I think, Anna, if you want to move on from now, I think it's this is all I wanted to say in terms of like our vision. Yes, this is like just a high-level vision of what is our biobank in terms of samples as of now, right? We have about 500,000 samples, and we distributed in the last 7 years about 70,000 specimens, so an average of 10,000 samples per year. Yeah, we have 5 main diseases, and we're adding more right now with this model. Up to you, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, in numbers, our biobank, it's, as Stefano said, almost 500,000 samples, which are actually all registered right now in OpenSpecimen. And in all those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 disease areas, they are found under multiple collection protocols. And we are lucky that we can have actual visuals of how many samples we are distributing per year, how many participants, how many visits those participants have actually taken in order to collect samples, and in how many sites, as you can see the numbers. So just to give a high overview of our data workflow, we have a specimen collection and that needs to start in multiple sites around the world. The participants are getting recruited in all the sites, and the information that comes from the CRFs is entered through OpenClinica in CRFs that are actually standardized across the collection protocols and the FIB sites later on. And that information through the OpenClinica and OpenSpecimen plugin, which is something that we developed with OpenSpecimen. Then all this information flows through to OpenSpecimen. The OpenSpecimen and OpenClinica plugin, it was something that it was actually necessary for us because we needed to find a way to keep track of the information that is associated with the data, and then all the information that comes after that, where the data is stored, all the different quality metrics for this specimen, and all the different requirements that need to be fulfilled in order those samples to be selected, etc., etc. We actually managed to do that with this plugin, which is something easily configurable by the OpenSpecimen users. And we have achieved multiple things that go around this data workflow and workflow specimen collection. For example, when it comes to collection workflow, since we could connect our EDC platform with our biobank software, and the platform could be accessed by the sites online, and it doesn't need you to have any installation, so it's a web-based platform, and this allowed us to have multi-site specimen collections where we could actually track real-time the events around the specimens, and we could save lots of time and money, I would say, in doing entry errors and actually having to relabel mislabeled tubes, etc., etc. Then when it comes to quality, the data, as I said before, around the quality indicators of the samples and also the associated clinical data, they were all found in one place where we needed them, and then we could easily and more accurately characterize our samples. So when it comes to the storage and in general IT systems and usage, as our biorepository was found away from FIND, the users there in the repository needed to access this easily. And so we had remote access ourselves in those freezers in the central repository. And when it came sometimes to troubleshoot, because we are found in different time zones, for example, there was a readily available user support that they could ask their questions rather than waiting for us to provide them our support. Then when it comes to distribution, we could easily have a sample list without having to export the data from another system. So we could already see where those positions where those samples were positioned, what type of samples we wanted, and we could create distribution protocols having saved our requester details, and then we could eventually create the order, ship the specimens, and track the shipment of those samples. And last, which is actually very important for us because we are a non-profit organization, so we need to show our biobank output to many stakeholders. We want to have some real-time reports where we could share them inside or outside the organization. So we managed to have this done with the queries, for example, in OpenSpecimen. So as Stefano and Sri and we mentioned before around the FIND integrated biobanks, we believe that OpenSpecimen is one of the best solutions that we could have for the FIB biobank software because first of all, it's an open source software that is web-based, so you just need to have an internet connection and everyone in the community and in the sites that we were collaborating with, they could have access to it. So this could actually build and strengthen and empower our collaborators and sites because it adds on a more sustainable infrastructure when it comes to global health settings and sites. So in our case, there are multiple scenarios that can happen. The FIB sites can actually access a study in our own FIND instance, or some sites might choose to have their own dedicated instance. So in that way, we actually achieve to have a standard biobank platform where we are not going to be worrying about how to harmonize our data because we have only one platform where users enter the data around the specimen collection. And then for the sites, this is for the sites that they choose their dedicated instance, they actually can scale up their capability to conduct collections much faster, and they can conduct specimen collections independently of FIND sponsorship, etc., etc. In order then to actually pull all the data that come from the various instances and studies together, we are building with OpenSpecimen the OpenSpecimen data warehouse, where we will have access to information coming from all those multiple studies, where the data will be pulled together under pre-designated fields. So we could create and query the data, create catalogs for filtering samples, and actually having catalogs for users to see what sort of specimens they are interested in, etc., etc. So as a final reminder of what is the motivation that keeps us going, we are in this in order to assist companies and academic partners to develop products that actually can save lives. This is a quote from a partner, and I just leave you to read this, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Anna, and thanks for talking about how. Oh, sorry. Seems like you got one more slide.
Yeah, it's yes. I would like to just have this slide for thanking our funders.
Sure. So, so I'll let others ask questions too. So anyone has any question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Anna and Stefano. But I will start with one question of my own just to get the ball rolling. One thing that I'm always interested in knowing is how people use reporting module, and one of the reasons being, we claim that our reporting module is very flexible. Usually, clinical systems, clinical databases don't come with a good reporting module. So, at max, you can just export all the data in an Excel sheet, and then usually then there are other, integrated with other systems where you can do, like SAP or other, reporting engines where you can do whatever reporting you want, or it would need an SQL developer, etc., to get data out of the database. The thing that interests me is, and since everyone has their own needs, do use the same thing in many different ways. I wanted to know how you use the reporting module and what kind of data do you get out of OpenSpecimen.
Yes, I could share my screen again. I stopped sharing. So the main interest that we have, as I said before, around reporting is on incoming materials and actually distributed materials. So if we have some specific queries that have to do with the material requests. So for example, I could show you here one example, which is what sort of samples we have distributed by month for one disease program. So this this is where the malaria disease distribution started, and we can track for each month how many samples we have distributed per specimen type, which is something that we track for reporting purposes to our funders, internal reporting purposes in order to see which sort of specimens are mostly used by the requesters, etc., etc. Then I could also show you something. Yes. This is a bit more detailed. Yes, usually we do export this information, for example, because we also have the tracking URL for those orders. So our Biobank coordinator actually exports this information because we also need to have some metrics on turnaround time, on how fast we actually process our requests. So we need to track from the moment that we actually selected the samples, or from the moment that we received the request to the moment that the requester received the samples, how many weeks, months, let's hope not years, have passed, so that we can actually have a measurable KPI. And maybe I should just show one last, this for example. Yes, so we have distributed samples per year. It takes a bit of time.
Do you even schedule these queries, or do you manually run them?
I mean, since they are year, reports,
No, not the monthly ones, the other ones.
Yes. No, we run them manually.
Manually. Okay.
Yes.
So there's a question that seems to be popular in the chat, asking whether OpenSpecimen is created only for sample storage, and why is it that you need to use OpenClinica as a plugin and transfer data, things like that. So I will give my side of the answer, and then Anna can chip in too. So the most basic question about can OpenSpecimen be used only for storage? The answer is no. OpenSpecimen also has a lot of other features which help you to collect additional data if you want. Very similar to say RedCap, OpenClinica, we have our own forms module, and many of our clients use that to say if you're running a breast cancer study and want to collect breast pathology annotations, you can do that. Medical questionnaires, patient history, things like that can all be collected within OpenSpecimen. But a lot of our clients still use, say, RedCap, OpenClinica, because they are the most popular EDCs, and the clinical sites who are the the clinical coordinators facing in the individual sites. are already trained on some of this, EDC systems, so they continue to use them and then pull data into OpenSpecimen. But at the same time, we have got many customers who use OpenSpecimen's forms to manage their clinical data. And
Yes.
I'm sure, yeah. So Anna,
I mean, this was the case for us. We had already preferred EDC system in Find. So because we didn't want to add one more system to be used by the sites, we tried to minimize that. So we used OpenClinica for the data entry, and then we streamlined that with the OpenClinica OpenSpecimen plugin. So OpenSpecimen is quite flexible on that, so it was quite easily to develop a plugin.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
And Isabel also asked, explain a bit more about development of the plugin. So
Yes.
the plugin, what it does is it pulls in all the data from OpenClinica into OpenSpecimen, including any specimen related data that you could have captured in OpenClinica. And we also have a very similar plugin for REDCap 2, which is more widely used in the academic world. So we have got a lot more installations of a REDCap plugin than the OpenClinica plugin. So, but both of them are very similar in their usage as well as in the way the plugin works. So the data is pulled in. So now because the challenge here is that when you have half of the data in OpenClinica or REDCap and then half of the data in OpenSpecimen, how do you find specimens of interest, right? How do you create all these queries that Anna was showing? If you don't have all the data in the same place, and because finally you are doing all this so that you can find specimens of interest, and so that is what these kinds of plugin help you do. That is, take advantage of the OpenSpecimens reporting module by pulling in all the data in one place, and now you can find specimens of interest.
Exactly.
And Sri, maybe I can add one more thing, which is the fact that some of our, I mean, not all of our clinical studies actually aim at collecting samples, right? So we have studies where the endpoint is in no way related to samples, and therefore that's why we need a dedicated system for clinical data capture. So I mean, I agree that if we only were thinking about the biobanking, the choice would be different, but we cannot really do that in our case.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and that's what happens with many of our customers, because they are running so many studies, and the coordinators are already trained on using one of these systems. Now, just for a small percentage of the projects which collect biospecimen, you don't want to train people on two systems. Okay, so I don't see more questions unless I missed anything. And we are also at the end of the hour. Stefano and Anna, it was a pleasure hosting you in this talk. We have been planning this for a long time. Things got pushed back because of COVID, and then now we are here. I think it was very, very productive to learn more about Find in the first place. There are a lot of things that I learned which I didn't know, even though I've been working with you guys for the last couple of years. So it was educative for me, and hopefully for others too. I'll let you, close the webinar with your closing comments.
Well, I would just say thank you, Sri, for arranging this and for giving us the opportunity to talk about OpenSpecimen and Find and what we do in Biobank. We strongly believe in the importance of the work that we do, but also on using open source software. And I'm actually very pleased to see that even big pharmaceutical companies and big diagnostics companies now are shifting their mindset, and they are embracing the use of open source platforms, which for me at least, they really represent the future of everything in terms of data development. So I feel like we still have a long way to go, but it's a pleasure to work with you and to support our activities together.
Yes, on the same note, I would like to thank you for inviting us. I believe that building strong collaborations is the main key on achieving our mission in Find. So And on that note, we have our collaborators in the call from Peru, for example. We have you. So it is very interesting to see that all of these collaborations that are based on open source software that has in mind always the community, it's actually, they should be always successful.
Thank you, thank you. That's it for today, and I'm very happy with our ability to stick on time. So it's exactly an hour. So thanks so
Yeah.
much, and thanks everyone else for joining.
We are
We'll
in
be
Switzerland after all. We should stick on time.
so I'll be sharing the video recording with everyone, and look forward to see you guys in the next webinar. Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye bye.